Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares is a popular reality TV show that ran for 10 years from 2004 until 2014. The show centred around acclaimed British chef Gordon Ramsay going into failing restaurants and helping to turn them around and become more successful. Anyone who has watched both the UK and US versions will know that the show featured many dramatic moments and showdowns between Gordon and the restaurant owners/chefs.
Then wake up! You wake up! Idiot! You come in here and help me instead of running your jaw. You shouldn't even be in the kitchen.
However, what you may not know is that there have been many behind-the-scenes scandals and crazy things that happened after the show finished. So in this video we're going to be exploring 4 shocking scandals from Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares that you never knew. And with that, let's get started. Amy and Samy got deported. Amy's Baking Company was a restaurant located in Scottsdale, Arizona that was owned by husband and wife team Amy and Samy Zocalo. The restaurant was featured in Season 6, Episode 16 of Kitchen Nightmares in 2013 and is perhaps the best known episode from the entire show. The episode featured several crazy meltdowns from both Amy and Samy, and there were several explosive exchanges with customers, which was more dramatic than anything we'd ever seen on the show before.
You stay and go! Stop! You go! You!
And at the end of the episode, Gordon decided that Amy and Samy were beyond help, and Gordon walked away from the restaurant for the first time in the history of the show. However, what you may not know is that many other crazy things have happened to Amy and Samy since their appearance on Kitchen Nightmares. Although we did get a glimpse into what had happened to the couple in the follow-up episode in Season 7 of Kitchen Nightmares, Amy and Samy have been involved in many scandals and legal battles since the show. I'm not going to talk about every scandal in this video, but what I will be focusing on this time is Samy's deportation from the US. As we found out on the show, Samy is originally from Israel and is not an American citizen, whereas Amy is, and the couple have been married since 2004. And in the episode, Amy did say that Samy was, quote, a playboy in Vegas, and then later in the episode, Samy described himself as a, quote, gangster. But what you may not know is that both Amy and Samy have prior criminal records. According to an article in USA Today, Amy pleaded guilty to the misuse of a social security number when she applied for a bank loan in 2003, and she also has various other convictions. And Samy once admitted in an interview that he had served time in prison 13 years before he immigrated to the US, and according to the Arizona Republic, Samy is banned from both France and Germany and has a history of drug and extortion charges. However, that's not the couple's only brush with the law, and Samy was eventually deported back to Israel. After the couple appeared on Kitchen Nightmares in 2013, Amy and Samy eventually sold the restaurant in Arizona, and they then moved to California, where Amy published a cookbook and also started a line of cannabis edibles. Apparently, the couple had already been fighting Samy's immigration case since 2008, presumably because Samy did not have the legal right to stay in the US. And Amy said in an interview that in total they spent around $250,000 in legal fees. In fact, the couple had hired an immigration lawyer named David Asser to help fight their case 2 years before they were on Kitchen Nightmares. And in an interview, David admitted that he did not know that the couple were going to appear on Kitchen Nightmares, but David did say that Samy's deportation case had, quote, nothing to do with the TV show. But in an interview with the New York Post in 2021, Amy said that Kitchen Nightmares, quote, put a spotlight on us, and Amy even revealed that the day after the episode aired, the immigration authorities called them and told them that Samy was being deported. However, it appears that Amy and Samy tried to fight the case for several years. But in 2018, Samy was ordered to leave the country and was deported back to Israel, and Amy went with him. The couple now live in Netanya, Israel, which is a coastal town with a population of around 230,000, located around 18 miles north of Tel Aviv, and it's a popular tourist destination because of its many miles of beaches. Amy said in an interview that they had started a, quote, new chapter of their lives in Israel, and Amy has opened her own bakery and also makes digital content about baking. Samy also said since moving to Israel, quote, "The life is honey, I'm enjoying this beautiful town, beautiful country." And there's actually a lot more crazy behind the scenes drama to do with Amy's baking company. So let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a full video explaining all of the dramas that Amy and Samy have been involved in. Chef died in a river. On Kitchen Nightmares, one of the main issues facing the restaurants featured on the show was that the owners/chefs were usually very resistant to change, and there were countless dramatic showdowns between Gordon and the owners.
Like last night, he ran up to every table and said, "Hello, my name's Nino."
The other main issue on the show was that the restaurants were most of the time losing money, and the owners were often hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And this financial burden was often the cause of a lot of tension in the episodes, and was ultimately what led to many of the restaurants closing down after Kitchen Nightmares was filmed. However, what you may not know is that one of the owners/chefs featured on the show sadly took his own life several years after appearing on the show. Campania was an Italian restaurant owned by Joe Cerniglia, which was located in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, just outside New York City. The restaurant was featured on the show in Season 1, Episode 9, which aired in 2007. In the episode, we found out that Joe had only purchased the restaurant 18 months before filming started, but the restaurant was already failing and was only a few months away from closing down. Joe was portrayed on the show as being too laid back with his staff and not taking the business seriously, and the restaurant was in disrepair with many broken items such as broken ovens and broken handles on the walk-in freezer. When Gordon visited the restaurant, he did not like Joe's attitude and also said that the food was not good, and Gordon and Joe butted heads on many occasions. Joe's wife, Melissa, was also featured in the episode, and she said that they had a lot on the line if the restaurant failed, and she worried about the future of their children because the couple were over $200,000 in debt. At the end of the episode, Joe seemed to have changed his attitude somewhat, and the restaurant did show some improvement. Although Yelp reviews were still largely negative according to online sources. And in fact, Joe won Chef Central's Bergen County Ultimate Chef competition in 2008 and also came runner-up in 2010. However, what you may not know is that in 2010, which was 3 years after the episode aired, Joe sold the restaurant. And then 8 days later, Joe apparently took his own life by jumping off the George Washington Bridge into the Hudson River. According to an article in the Mail Online, Joe was 39 years old at the time and his body was found floating in the river. Apparently, a passerby reported to police that they saw a man jump from the 200-foot-high George Washington Bridge, which connects Bergen County, New Jersey to Manhattan, New York, and around an hour later, police found Joe's body in the river. According to an article in the New York Daily News, Joe had reportedly been caught taking cocaine at his restaurant a few months before his death, and he was reportedly, quote, sweating profusely, shaking and in need of medical assistance. And on top of that, according to an article in DNA Info, despite Joe being married to Melissa, Joe had apparently had an affair with a pastry chef named Jessica at his restaurant. And I remembered that in the episode of Kitchen Nightmares, there was a waitress named Jessica at Joe's restaurant, and I wondered if it was the same person. So after a bit of digging, I found an article in Fox News that confirmed that this was the same Jessica that was featured in the episode as a waitress, and she had seemingly been promoted from waitress to pastry chef. And Jessica's mother, Anna, said in the article that, quote, they loved each other very much, and she also said that after Joe's death, quote, my daughter is devastated. After Joe's death, many people also brought up the eerie coincidence that in the original episode of Kitchen Nightmares, during a heated exchange, Gordon told Joe that his debt-ridden restaurant was, quote, about to swim down the Hudson. Gordon Ramsay did, however, address Joe's death in a statement, and Gordon said, quote, I was fortunate to spend time with Joe during the first season of Kitchen Nightmares. Joe was a brilliant chef, and our thoughts go out to his family, friends, and staff. And Joe's brother-in-law, Kevin Wynn, also praised Gordon and said, quote, in no way did Gordon have anything to do with Joe's death. When we were filming, I found him to be nothing but a gentleman. I have the utmost respect for him. And it appears that Joe was not the only owner from Kitchen Nightmares who had a relationship with one of their waitresses. Stay tuned to find out who. Owner left his wife for waitress. Owning a restaurant can clearly be very stressful, and on Kitchen Nightmares, they often showed the owners' personal lives, including their spouses/partners or family and friends, and how the failing restaurants were having a negative effect on their relationships. However, what you may not know is that one of the owners actually left his wife for a waitress that worked at the restaurant. Zocalo was a Mexican restaurant located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and was featured in Season 4, Episode 17 of Kitchen Nightmares in 2012. The restaurant was owned by married couple Greg and Mary Russell. In the episode, Greg told us that he once worked as a bartender, and Mary, who is Mexican, made fresh tortillas and worked across from the bar. The two of them fell in love and later got married, and they purchased Zocalo in 2008, and the couple also have several grown-up children, including 2 daughters who work at Zocalo and were featured in the episode. Throughout the episode, though, they talked about how Greg and Mary's relationship had broken down because of the failing state of the restaurant. Greg also claimed that he worked 7 days a week, whereas Mary only came in a few days a week and was generally very critical of everyone. When Gordon arrived, he praised the authentic Mexican decor of the restaurant. However, he disliked the food and said that Greg had clearly lost his passion for cooking and was cutting corners and serving below par food. Greg later admitted that he was $750,000 in debt and said that he and Mary were constantly fighting and that Mary was not supportive of him. By the end of the episode, though, the restaurant seemed to have improved and Greg and Mary's relationship also seemed to be better. However, the Yelp reviews for Zocalo were apparently still mostly negative after the show, and the restaurant reportedly closed for the holidays a year after filming at the end of 2012/the beginning of 2013, and the restaurant apparently never reopened. And given that Greg and Mary's relationship was shown to not be very good, it is perhaps not that much of a surprise to learn that they later got divorced. However, what may surprise you is that Greg actually married one of the waitresses from the restaurant. According to Reality TV Revisited, Greg and Mary divorced sometime after filming the episode, and Greg then married Maria, who was a waitress featured in the episode. I couldn't find much information about this, but I did find this photo of Greg and Maria that by the looks of it was posted on Facebook by Maria in 2017. Restaurant manager sued the show. It should probably come as no surprise that many of the people featured in Kitchen Nightmares were less than pleased with their portrayal on the show.
I can give you the best advice you'll ever get. Lock the door and close it down.
And there have been several lawsuits filed against the show. I won't go through all of the lawsuits now, but the one I'm going to focus on in this video involves Martin from Dillons Restaurant. Dillons/Pernima was a restaurant located in New York City and was featured in Season 1, Episode 2 of Kitchen Nightmares in 2007. The restaurant was portrayed as having an identity crisis because it served different types of food, including American Irish as well as Indian, which was reflected by the fact that the restaurant had 2 names and multiple food menus. The owner, named Mohammed, also had 3 different managers. Martin was the general manager, Andrew was the operations manager, and Khan was the floor manager. And in the episode, Gordon said that there were too many managers and implied as though they were not really doing their jobs properly. The restaurant was also shown to be very dirty, particularly in the kitchen. And there also seemed to be an infestation of flies, which was mentioned several times throughout the episode. Gordon also said that the food was very bad quality, and at one point the chefs even served a vegetarian dish to Gordon, but it later turned out that it actually contained meat. Martin, who was the general manager, seemed to be the main focus of Gordon's frustrations in the episode. And at one point, Gordon told the restaurant owner, Mohammed, that he should fire one of the managers and recommended that Martin should be the one that gets fired. Martin seemingly overheard this conversation and interrupted them and tried to defend himself, and there was an awkward exchange between Martin and Gordon.
Tonight, Mohammed,
Yeah.
I've never used you, I've respected you,
Yeah.
I'm proud of what we've done, I've never cheated you,
Excuse
and I
me.
take...
But Martin eventually said he was quitting and walked out. However, what you may not know is Martin actually tried to sue Gordon and the show more than once and claimed that they, quote, wrecked my life. In an article by the Mail Online from 2008, which was a year after the episode aired, Martin said that he was suing the show for £500,000, which is over $600,000 for damages. And Martin said that Gordon, quote, completely assassinated my character. In the article, Martin claimed that, quote, my reputation is in tatters and nobody wants to employ me. I've only managed to watch it, meaning the episode, once because it was like watching myself getting mugged. Martin also claimed that Gordon used him as a, quote, scapegoat for the restaurant's issues, and Martin also accused the show of faking several things in the episode. For example, there was one scene where Martin was shown lying down in a booth in the restaurant while one of the servers brushed his hair, and Gordon then branded Martin as a, quote, lazy idiot. However, according to Martin, it was actually the show's idea to do that, and they were the ones that told Martin to lie down and take a rest. And Martin said, quote, I'd love people to be able to see the unedited footage. Martin also claimed that the customers featured in the episode after the relaunch were actually extras that were hired by the show and they were not real customers at all. And Martin added that the show refused to film the restaurant's cabaret bar even though it made up 70% of the restaurant's income. And Martin said that whenever they showed him talking on the phone in the episode, they made out that Martin was taking personal calls. But according to Martin, he was actually busy arranging bookings for the cabaret bar, but because they refused to mention the cabaret bar in the episode, it looked like Martin was doing nothing. Martin also said in the article, quote, Gordon called me a fake, but the whole show is fake. When Kitchen Nightmares was approached for comment about the lawsuit, a spokesperson for Gordon Ramsay refused to comment. However, a spokesperson for Channel 4, which was the channel in the UK that aired the show, said, quote, these allegations were first made public last year as part of a court case in the US and were strongly disputed by the production companies involved. Channel 4 is not a party to any court case on these matters. And in a different article by The Observer, Martin also said that there were several scenes that were filmed that did not make it to air. This included one alleged humiliating scene where Gordon forced Martin to, quote, crawl on his hands and knees in search of his cell phone, which Gordon had allegedly thrown out onto the street. And in an article by Mashed, Martin filed a second lawsuit to try and block the episode from being aired, and Martin accused the show of, quote, deceitful editing practices. Martin apparently had never seen Kitchen Nightmares before and was unaware of what the show was like, and Martin said, quote, call me naive, call me dumb or something, I was totally shocked. However, according to the article, the judge dismissed Martin's second lawsuit, and there don't seem to be any other updates about the lawsuit since then. So there you go, there were 4 crazy scandals from Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares that you never knew. Did any of these scandals surprise you? And are there any other episodes of Kitchen Nightmares that you'd like me to make a video about? Let me know in the comments. If you'd like to get early access to my videos as well as exclusive content, you can become a member of my Patreon for just a few dollars a month and you'll unlock these amazing benefits. I'll put a link in the description. Please make sure you like, comment and share this video as it really helps support my channel. And of course, please make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date about new uploads. Thanks for watching and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye!